Hello beautiful people, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today's video is probably going to ruffle some feathers. What's new? Because my YouTube channel usually covers controversial topics, but this essentially is a video about me essentially kind of going into details about certain racial topics that I feel like either get minimized or swept under the rug. I feel like a lot of conversations around race only become controversial because people are uncomfortable with honesty, and a lot of people hear conversations about race and immediately personalize everything instead of actually engaging with the point being made. But anyway, let's get into it. But before we do, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe at the end of the video. Number 1, calling out white privilege doesn't mean you're saying that white people don't have problems. I think one of the most intellectually dishonest things people do in conversations about race is purposely misunderstand what white privilege means. Acknowledging white privilege is not the same thing as saying that white people don't experience hardships. Like, what we are saying is that race is less likely to be the thing that's making those hardships worse. And I think it's also worth mentioning that a white person can face some sort of adversity and still benefit from white privilege at the same time. For example, a white person can be a woman, gay or Jewish while still benefiting from whiteness. And those things can coexist. Like, I don't understand why it's so hard for them to understand that. But, being a white person that's marginalized in one area doesn't now absolve you from benefiting from white privilege. So, yeah. Number 2, people downplay slavery in ways that they would never downplay the Holocaust. And this might make some people uncomfortable, which I don't understand why again, but I absolutely believe that society responds differently to anti-Black historical trauma compared to other forms of historical trauma. For example, like, people would immediately recognize how disgusting it would sound to tell a Jewish person, get over the Holocaust. But somehow, when it comes to slavery, colonization or segregation or any type of anti-Black racism, Black people are constantly told that was a long time ago and that we should move on. History literally shapes wealth, education, housing, policing, like literally everything. Like, society becomes particularly defensive, like, when Black people point this out, because racism is deeply embedded and we underestimate the severity of slavery because schools and the media often minimize it, and to make it easier to digest and to cater to white guilt. And I can't really go into details on here about how bad slavery was, but let's just say it's more than just lynchings or lashes. Even when slavery formally ended, anti-Black systems did not suddenly disappear. They just evolved. This continued shaping Black life long after the abolition of slavery. So it's intellectually dishonest when people try and reduce slavery to that happened years ago. And I think part of that discomfort comes from the fact that truly acknowledging the scale of slavery would require society and white people to acknowledge how much of modern Western wealth and power was built off of Black suffering. Number 3, cultural appropriation and cultural assimilation are not the same thing. Another thing that genuinely annoys me is when people act like cultural appropriation and cultural assimilation are the same thing. Like, the false equivalence needs to be studied. In multicultural cities like London, cultures are naturally going to influence each other. Like, London is a melting pot of cultures, that's normal. People grow up around different communities, slang, music, fashion, food, and traditions. Cultures rubbing off on one another is inevitable. This isn't the issue. The issue is when people ignore power dynamics. There's a difference between someone from a dominant racial group profiting from another culture and someone from a marginalized group assimilating into said dominant culture because they want to avoid exclusion or punishment or discrimination. Like, me and my friend Mr. J, we always have these type of conversations, but we literally had a conversation not too long ago about growing up feeling like we needed to suppress certain aspects of our culture to avoid discrimination or bullying. And I think white people fail to recognize that for many minority groups, assimilation was connected to survival. Like, this pressure is so deeply historical. Like, back in the 18th century, I made a video talking about black hair. It's one of my older videos, but I did touch on the Teal laws, which was essentially a legislation put in place that forced black women to cover up their hair. So black women were expected to minimize aspects of their blackness in order to fit into white beauty standards. And that's why it's a false equivalency when people say, like, oh, if black women can wear wigs, then white women should be able to wear braids. Those situations do not come from the same social history or power dynamic. White women wearing braids they often do so to engage within a certain trend or aesthetic without experiencing the same historical discrimination that black women often experience. So it's as simple as this. One dynamic is shaped by pressure to conform, whereas the other one is shaped by choice and trend. I think we're at number 4. Black people are expected to prioritize white people's feelings during conversations about racism. One of the most frustrating parts of conversations about racism is how quickly the focus shifts away from the actual issue and onto protecting white people's feelings. It feels like black people are constantly expected to soften our language or over-explain ourselves or add disclaimers and package our experiences in a way that doesn't make white audiences uncomfortable or feel personally attacked. Like, you always have to say, like, not all white people, and it becomes exhausting when people who benefit from the racist system are prioritized more than those who are affected by the racist system. Like, that's a problem. And again, we always are expected to say not all white people, but when black people are stereotyped collectively through media and public discourse, there's rarely that same urgency to interrupt those conversations with not all black people. This is my last one, and this is mainly for black people. Not all interracial relationships are rooted in love. I made a video talking about interracial relationships not so long ago, so you should probably check that video out too. Yeah, not all interracial relationships are rooted purely in love. And before people intentionally misunderstand me, please don't misunderstand me, should I say. I'm not saying that interracial relationships are automatically problematic. People do fall in love, across racial lines every single day. What I'm saying is that attraction does not exist outside of social conditioning. And I also think that some people need to be more honest about how internalized racism can shape attraction. Sometimes interracial relationships genuinely are about compatibility, but other times there is self-hatred involved. Like, some people date outside of their race. Some black people date outside of their race to associate with whiteness, because they perceive whiteness is, associated with success or power. And honestly, within the black community, this conversation tends to become more particularly obvious when you talk about how some black men publicly bash black women when uplifting other races of women. And at some point, we need to stop pretending that degrading black women is simply preference, because if your attraction to another race is built on the contempt of your own people, that's not neutral. And another thing that I notice is the inconsistencies. Some black men will use stereotypes to justify why they don't date black women. Yet they could hear multiple stories of white women fetishizing them. They could hear stories of non-black women, falsely accusing them, but yet those stories won't be enough to deter black men from interracial dating. That contradiction matters. It's just blatantly self-hate. And honestly, this sounds less like preference and more like internalized anti-blackness. And I think people need to be more comfortable acknowledging how deeply race shapes desirability, because attraction is not formed in a vacuum. Society often influences what people are taught to value. Why do women like tall men? Why do men like skinny women? Or, do you know what I mean? Obviously, for me, height isn't an issue, but, it would be silly of me to acknowledge that height does play a role in maybe why women like tall men or why men like shorter women. But anyway, those are just some of the conversations I think society either oversimplifies or avoids having. And I already know that some people are going to disagree with parts of what I said, but I think discomfort and disagreement are sometimes necessary for growth. Like, not every conversation about race is hatred, division, or an attack. Sometimes people are simply describing patterns and lived experiences that make others uncomfortable. But as the saying goes, it is what it is. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye!